to take us over to Bob Dunham, the founder of the Institute for Generative Leadership, my coach, my mentor, my colleague, and really an inspiration to many of us here for over the past couple, maybe 3 decades. So he's going to take us into a conversation on how to build morale and minimize employee burnout. And so if I may, Bob, if you would, take us away, please.
Thank you very much. Everybody give me a high 10. I want to make sure I'm looking at people, not cutouts. That's good. Very good. Those of you who have your camera off, if you can turn them on, please do so, because the kind of work we do is conversational, not presentational. And so we'll be doing some conversation later on. I'm going to be introducing some perspectives, and we'll have a short breakout to have a chat with a colleague, and then we'll do some exploration here together. So can everybody take a deep breath, please? And the reason we take deep breaths is not for the breathing. You seem to be doing that already. The deep breath is an act of becoming present. It's letting go of the tension, getting out of your head, and actually bringing your attention forward to what's going on. And so there may be times when there's a moment in our conversation that we want to focus in or emphasize, or I just wondered where the hell you went to, or I'll say, take a deep breath and reach out, reconnect, and we'll go forward with that. Our topic, that as Chris said, that was set up from listening to many of the people we work with, we serve, and we speak with, morale and burnout. Big issues out there in the world. And these were big issues before COVID. And they're bigger now, because connection and feeling like belonging and being able to really be connected, not just with each other, but with life, it's been interrupted. Certain things that were available and natural are not so available today. And we are going to take that as a leadership challenge, in fact, even as a leadership opportunity, because the enemy in the world of action, in the world of organizations, in the world of leadership, your biggest enemy is resignation. And resignation is the story that I'm stuck somewhere and I can't do anything about it. And resignation is not only a down mood, it also shows up in organizations as being very intelligent. You know, that's not feasible. Mm-hmm. I don't think we can pull that off. And we know that there's danger on the other side too, just to be ungrounded and flaky and going anywhere. But what's the point of these conversations? What do we want out of this morale and burnout conversation? They're challenges, they're breakdowns. We want to be able to do something about them. We want to be able to make a change. And I believe that in our lives, not just our professional work, but in our lives, that's a capability that we'll call leadership. Leading yourself, leading other people, leading communities, leading situations. And the question of leadership, which I believe is rooted in the foundational question of being alive, is what the hell am I going to do with this situation? Am I going to contract in front of it? Am I going to give up in front of it? Am I going to have a story about how bad it is that's preventing me from accomplishing something or feeling meaning or value or satisfaction? In this posture, we talk about generative leadership, but the word generative, I'm going to apply to just a capacity we have as human beings, that we can generate. No matter what's going on in the situation, we have choice. Even if your story is you don't. And if you disagree with me and say, no, Bob, that you really don't have choice, I'll say that's your story. You just demonstrated my point. We always have choice about the perspective we're going to take, the choices that are open, and how we're going to play it. And from this perspective, the spirit of it is you are 50% of everything. that happens to you and around you. And part of our work in the generative tradition is to awaken people. You have this power of being 50% of everything. And when you give up and say, no, I don't, I've only got 1%, that's how you're using your 50%. And then we want to take a deep breath. Go ahead, take a deep breath. And actually pause and actually step back a little bit and say, where am I with this? What's in my way? Usually it's myself. Usually when we get stuck, we're facing a situation we don't know how to deal with. But it's different to have the interpretation, I'm in a situation I don't know how to deal with, than to say I'm in a situation in which I have no choice. And we collapse the two. We forget, well, maybe if I learned something, I could do something. Maybe if I got some help, maybe if I open missing conversations, we could move this puppy forward, even if I don't know what to do. One of the biggest breakdowns we found in our culture is people think they need to know what to do to get moving. And we've learned in our 4 decades of studying leadership that for powerful leadership, not knowing what to do does not stop you. It's actually the starting point. If you don't know what to do, it's time to get to work. It's time to open conversations. It's time to explore. It's time to learn. It's time to prototype. It's time to experiment. It's time to get help. There's so many things we can do when we don't know. We have to stop being a student in school passing tests and start being in life dealing with the reality that it will always be beyond us. If you're dealing with problems that are beyond what you know, congratulations, that means you're successful. That means you haven't contracted into a world that's so small that you're in control, which is a fantasy that some people think is a good thing. No, that just means you're going to be a very small person because you don't know a lot. The world's pretty big. Lots of stuff going on. And what we want to do in being generative is move out into that world with this underlying posture that we can make a difference. We can make a change. We can do things, and we can do it in multiple dimensions. Doesn't mean it's easy. In fact, it doesn't mean it's comfortable. Usually it's not. But you can. And if you really want to dedicate yourself to having something happen, what we've learned in our 4 decades is you can do that. By the way, the more you do that, the less that comfort is an issue. I almost never have a situation now when my body starts tapping me on the shoulder and saying, this is uncomfortable, Bob. And I say, yeah, thanks for sharing. We're going anyway. We have a possibility here we're going to pursue. So how are we doing here? You ready to do some exploration? I don't know. Everybody's kind of looking at me stone-faced.
I don't know.
Show me that you're live. Right.
Yeah, thumbs up. You can use the reactions button. Yeah.
So I'm going to offer these perspectives that we've literally been working with for 4 decades. The first thing I want to say about being generative is you're already generative. If you're a human being and alive, you're generative. You're generating. Now, what you may be generating may not be satisfying to you, may not be effective, may not have value, satisfaction, and meaning, but you are generating that. That's your 50%. And so what we want to do is look more at what are my patterns of generation. You see, in leadership, you can't sit on the sidelines. You're leading whether you like it or not, whether you have the title or not. Leading is creating the future with others, and you're already doing that. And so when we zoom out and look from that perspective, we say, oh shit, there's more opportunity here than I thought. I can stop stopping myself and begin to look at what's possible here. These topics of morale and burnout, the way they were postured in the invitation was kind of like the morale of the organization. We need to have a good morale. If we're going to have a successful organization, good morale on the team. Can't win with bad morale, can we? And then burnout, too many people burning out. We got to take care of them. We got to be leaders. But guess what? If you don't know how to manage your own morale and your own energy, and your own edge at burnout, you're not going to be that successful with your team. And so the first place we're going to look at is at yourself. So I'm going to do some question and response kind of stuff with you today to provoke you. How do you see your world? How are you moving in your world? And this isn't a quiz to assess yourself with. This is simply doing inquiry for exploration. And so if we're going to talk about morale and burnout, let's start right now with the question, how's your morale? How's your morale? How are you doing? Good. How's your posture toward the future? Are you satisfied with it? And it begs a question sometimes when we begin to really explore here. A question that we take very seriously is the question, what? We have a very action-oriented culture that is all about, well, how do I do that? And we always start with, what is it? So we're going to have this question, what is morale? To see if we can get an even clearer grasp of it, because when you know what something is, then talking about how to do it is a lot more productive. For example, when I ask the question, what is leadership? The background interpretation that a lot of people have is, well, it's the person with the title. It's the decision maker. It's the expert. And none of those are qualities of leadership, by the way. That's being an expert or having a title. Lots of people that are experts and have titles that don't come across as good leaders. So we're going to do what is morale. And burnout, how's your energy? How are you coping with the COVID world? How's your aliveness? How's your vitality? And I'm going to drop some invitations along the way here. I'm going to be speaking to set up some framing and then ask you some questions and have you have a chat with a colleague as well as the group. And I think the COVID has been a challenge in many ways and a tragedy for too many people. And it seems to be raging out there in the world right now. But what can we do in a COVID world? What can we generate in a COVID world rather than wait for it to go back to the way it was? If we had a global depression, the question would be the same, maybe a little bit less life and death at stake, but the question would be the same. Do we have to wait for the world to turn out the way we want it for us to be effective and living a good life or making a difference or creating value? And so that's just something to notice, that we can fall into moods, we can fall into stories about our situation. And the question that we've found valuable over the years is your story about how you're seeing your world and what you're doing about it, is it generative? Is it enabling you to generate, or is it part of the problem? If you want to take some notes, we're going to do further discussion on this. And when we talk about morale and burnout, we're going to talk about what they are and about how to deal with them from the perspective of the work we've done for 40 years. You all may have your own experiences and insights that'll be valuable here. So let me start here. So I'm going to do a little bit of framing here to set up some vocabulary so we can think more deeply about stuff. Otherwise, I just go to tips and techniques right away, and you'd be very satisfied, but I don't know if it would have any sustaining power. And so if we're going to talk about building morale and dealing with burnout, you ever had a day that looked like this? You ever had a future that looked like this? And I've been there a few times. And the question is, well, what do we do about that? if we're going to be generative about finding ourselves in a situation like that or helping people who are there, what would it take? What would it take to have a different possibility, a different future? See, the fact that you're standing in ashes doesn't mean your future is ashes. That's something we forget sometimes. So sometimes we get into stories like, well, I can't change the world. And my question is, whose world are we talking about? You know, if we make the world the big thing that's so big out there, we can't touch it. But you are creating a world with other people right now. So let's look at what our issue is here with morale or burnout, and I want to take you to what we call the learning edge. Somebody take a deep breath. I want you to take a look in your own life and find the experience of what we call the edge. The edge is that place where your body reacts and says, uh-oh, I'm going from what's familiar to what's unfamiliar. I'm going from where I'm confident to uncertain. I'm going to where fear can show up. I'm going from where I know to what I don't know. I'm going from where I'm comfortable to where I'm uncomfortable. That's the edge. And our experience of learning, particularly in leadership, is that your relationship with the edge is one of the biggest relationships you'll have in life. And what we do is we ask people to look at your own patterns around edges, you know, where you stop, where your comfort zone ends, and say, what's your relationship there? And we're going to call that a learning edge. And we're going to invite you to see that if you go beyond the edge, the big possibilities beyond the ones you already have are beyond your edge. So instead of being triggered or contracted or fearful at the edge, we can be curious. We can be interested. We can be explorers. And this requires that we have a focus on our relationship with the unknown and a relationship with fear. So how does the edge show up for you? What does it look like for you? Whatever that edge is. And it can be in any domain. It could be in any domain of action. It can be in relationship. It can be in leadership. It can be around issues of power and authority. It can be around, I don't cook very well. I've learned to accept the fact that in the domain of the kitchen, the only thing I know how to do is grab a can opener. And I'm not going to make it an edge right now anyway. And so the edge, though, is a place of possibility. This picture actually shows that the big possibilities that we may be interested in or facing are over our edge. We need to know how to build power at the edge. And as in this picture, one of the biggest breakdowns at the edge is you find yourself alone. We need to learn and to lead at these edges. And we do it best with others, not as solo artists. And so how do we get to the edge? We have to learn to go beyond it. To first of all, hold it as a possibility for learning, giving ourselves room to be a dignified beginner, for example. Many people don't know how to be a dignified beginner. They think that not knowing is something wrong, rather than, oh, how cool, I've got some stuff I don't know that I get to learn. And so we're going to be looking at that. Where do edges come from? Mostly blind spots. Blind spots are not only personal and individual, they're cultural. When you don't know something, and you know you don't know, we call that being ignorant. And being ignorant is a very powerful place to be, because when you know you don't know something, you can get help. You can still handle things. I don't know accounting, but because I know I don't know accounting, I have good help with accounting. I can handle accounting because I'm ignorant. But when you're blind, you don't know that you don't know. It doesn't exist for you, and you don't have choices. One of the biggest things we've learned in our decades of studying leadership is most of the barriers that people find are blind spots or old history that they're carrying around with them. And so the way we're going to look here, and even though I'm producing framing here, listen as though this is relevant, because this gives us a vocabulary to talk about things in a very deeper way for things like morale and burnout. One thing we can say about a human being is that you are an observer. You see what you see. You see the world that you see. But you don't see the world as it is. You see the world as your nervous system is shaped to see it. And different people with different nervous systems see different worlds. I just mentioned accounting. An accountant sees the world of numbers differently than I do. Different observer. A chef sees the world of cuisine different than I do. An architect sees the world of buildings different than I do. A physician sees the world of bodies different than I do. And we're looking for what is the observer of leadership, or at least what is the observer of being a generative human being. And what we found is, while there's a lot of wisdom and learning opportunities out there about topics like this, a lot of the conversations stop at being an observer. Here's a distinction. Here's how you look. Here's a perspective. Isn't that interesting? Oh, let's chat about it. Oh, that's nice. And then we don't do anything. And you probably forget it 2 months later. It's not enough to be an observer. We have to build ourselves to be an actor. So what's being an actor to be generative is our question. So we have an observer that can take action, and a particular observer can take choices that produce particular results. And we're going to be looking at also adding being an actor, and we're going to be looking at this generative perspective. So why am I taking this time to speak about being generative? Because this is what we want about morale and burnout. We want generative answers, things that we can see, that are actions, that we can do, that we can learn, and that will allow us to produce the outcome of a positive morale and vitality. So one more thing I want to introduce here, that this is not just concepts to understand. I'm actually describing what we've found over our decades of work here about how people see their world and act in their world. So I've been describing you. What kind of observer are you? What world do you see, and what world are you blind to? What kind of actor are you? Where are you competent and where are you not? Where do you enter and where do you draw back? And this happens in multiple dimensions. The reason I'm sharing this with you is in our work with leadership and teams over the years, we found these were awarenesses that people often did not have. And so out there in the business, professional, get stuff done world, there's a kind of conversation, there's a kind of place to put your attention, which is all about results in the world. You know, the business produce the numbers and you know, generate the product and get it done. But anything that's non-trivial out there in the world requires teams and organizations to produce it. We call that the we world. We want to emphasize it takes people. If that sounds obvious, it's amazing how many leaders and organizations we work with that we go in. They're all about the numbers and they don't have a foggy idea how to organize the we world, effective teams and organizations. And here's a big barrier for learning for a lot of people in the leadership domain. If you want to be effective in the we world with other people, creating coordination of action that makes stuff happen, you're going to have to step back into getting familiar with yourself, your own body, your own emotional reactions, your own competencies, your own perspectives. And when I started working with leadership, including this perspective, I found this is where a lot of people clam up. Oh, no, 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 no. Tell me about leadership out there. Don't look at me. I don't want to have to look at myself. You mean I have to look at all the barriers that I have? Yes, that's what we're looking at here. So that's what I said at the beginning. If you're going to be good at producing positive morale and managing burnout, you have to be able to do it with some awareness in yourself to be able to take it back to your team and the world. So with that, let me say a few things about morale and burnout. And take a deep breath. You with me so far? So what I've been sharing with you are perspectives, a vocabulary to begin talking about what's going on in these human, interactive, and even personal domains of experience. So if we look at morale is almost always referred to in groups. The morale of the team, the morale of the organization, the morale of the community, the morale of the nation. It can certainly apply to an individual, but usually you'll have that terminology with groups. And burnout, damn, it's not talked about very much. Seems to happen a lot more than it's talked about. Very interesting. And you're very lucky to have me speaking to you about burnout here. I've done it big time in my life twice. Physical, emotional, cognitive burnout, where I had to go through recovery periods of over a year. So I have a PhD in burnout. And so it's been an interesting exploratory space for me to say, how the hell did I get there? And it was from my virtues, work hard, get it done, be responsible. You can pound yourself into dust doing that. And so there's something missing if we find ourselves falling into that hole. So what are morale and burnout? Where do they arise from? I'm going to propose we look at it from the point of view of whatever set of actions you are in your life, professionally and personally, whatever actions your social relationships are in, whatever actions your teams, organizations are in, there's a way we can think about how these are organized that I'm going to call games. Action is always happening inside a game. And by game, I'm not trivializing it to say it's entertainment. I'm saying the structure of action itself that we're going to call game is profound and important. Everything arises in a structure of a game. Not only the game of being an expert, being a professional, there's a game of marriage. There's a game called Good Life. Are you playing the game of Good Life? Is that something that's going to happen when you retire? It's a game. And if you're not playing it, it's less likely to happen. The game of being a team, the game of being a leader. And what this structure of game suggests to us is that it has structure. There are ways to play that win, and there are ways to play that lose. And so, as we're talking about morale and burnout, I'm going to propose that we look at burnout first. Because if you're burned out, morale ain't going to matter. Morale has been handled. It is the pile of ash on the floor that was you. And so let's look at burnout. Let's look at vitality. What are the challenges there for you yourself in your life, for your team, for your future that you share with others? And what's the opposite of burnout? Well, I'll suggest it's health and vitality, but sustained health and vitality. Now, being the guy who's burned out, the self-avowed burnout artist here, this has been a learning edge for me in my life. And so First of all, let's talk about physical burnout. Has anybody here gone through serious physical burnout in your life? Am I the only one? Okay, we've had some people on that edge. And usually it's because you're expending energy beyond what you have, and you deplete your reserves physically and emotionally, and you think you have to. And maybe you have the Iron Man complex, like, I'm tough, I can gut it out. And I found that doesn't work. So there's a beautiful perspective I want to share with you here. To observe your patterns, or the patterns of your team, or the patterns of your community in this burnout space, which is the cycle of energy represented from ancient Chinese wisdom. They have a cycle that is the natural seasons. You go from winter to spring to summer, fall, and back to winter. But those are energetic states. And the suggestion they have from that wisdom tradition is every cycle of energy has to go through all the phases. So for example, when you breathe in, you expand, but then you have to let go and breathe out. Every day the sun comes up, but then the sun goes down and you need to sleep. Everything has a cycle where you go, you awaken, the energy goes up, you become productive, you harvest, and then you let go. Then you rest. And if you rest effectively, you do something called renewal. And when I studied that a little bit, I suddenly realized, when I was thinking back to my work career, that we live in a culture that's all about awaken, produce, harvest. Awaken, produced, harvest. No stopping, no resting, no renewing. And so just take a moment here and notice any areas where you feel exhausted or depleted or not having the energy you want. Just take a moment and think about your team or organization. Where do they seem stretched or low energy? And I've found in our Western culture that we are missing the rest and renewal part of the cycle. And it goes from how you breathe to what you do every hour during the day, what you do on a daily basis. So just give yourself a little note. How am I doing with rest and renewal in the small cycles as well as the big cycles? Do I know how to sustain my vitality? That's the edge of burnout. And when we deal with employees, which was part of the invitation, do they know how to do that? Maybe they manage themselves at work, but if they're out partying all night, every night, that's burnout coming. You can't prevent burnout in someone else. They have to be supported to manage their own body and their own energy. Make sense? One of the principles of leadership. You don't get to do it for them, but you can help them. Then another part of burnout is an ethical, moral, interpretive ground that you stand on. One of the stories in our culture is, if you want to succeed, do more. And what happens when you do more? Well, the more story tends to hang around, saying, okay, I did that, I guess it's time to do more. When your default story is do more, it is headed toward burnout. And when you combine that with some success in leadership or your profession, when you're successful, that will attract more demand. You will receive more requests. You'll have people want you to do more. They say, hey, you can handle this. You're so good. You can do this. And that was the deadly cocktail that I had. I kept getting promoted and I kept stretching to do more because I thought I had to, and I didn't know where to stop. I didn't set the healthy boundaries. And so there's a different place that we need to look at our success strategies. You see, one of the things I've learned over these decades, you're not going to be successful in life because you do more. You're going to be successful in life because you create more value, and they are not the same thing. You want to focus on how do I create more value without exhausting myself like I'm a donkey adding more bricks to carry. How do you increase the value of your work, your promises, your outcomes, rather than simply doing more? This is huge, by the way. I would say the majority of people are lost in the do more habit. And there's a big cost to the do more habit. You're so damn exhausted, you don't have time to stop and strategize, think, learn, grow, and then it just becomes a death spiral. One way to check yourself, if the do more monster is sitting on your shoulder, who runs your day, you or your to-do list? Oh, I don't get to choose what I do today. My to-do list is full. I don't need to think about it. I just need to grind. Sometimes we need to throw out the to-do list and start from a blank sheet of paper. And so what is your pattern? The question that is very important for team success and personal vitality and success is, how much is enough? How much is enough for you? How much satisfaction is enough? How much value is enough? How much meaning is enough? Because if you live in the more story, it's never enough. And I believe that our planet has this issue called sustainability because the people are driven by the more story. Got to do more, got to do more. You know, we have stockholders. There's no limit to the profit we can make. Go for more. We need to learn what's enough, and we need to learn when to stop, and we need to learn what to let go of. So just write down if there's any edges for you where you feel like I'm always running from behind. I'm never getting there. And I'm determined and I'm staying with it. And when I read about the health workers dealing with COVID, you know, it just, sometimes they say, God, I'm just exhausted. There doesn't seem to be any end to this. There's a leadership challenge there, by the way. How do we help people who are facing that kind of, how do we change the game? So that's not the story we get trapped in. Renewal. Resting is not enough. You see, resting can simply be breathing deeply to dive back into the grind. Okay, I feel a little better now. Let's start grinding again. I'm here again, to-do list. And so what is renewal? Renewal has a couple of characteristics. One is that when you rest and you start again, that you've chosen it, that you're not imprisoned by it. I went to sleep last night, I woke up, and I have a choice if I'm going to recommit to my day-to-day rather than just have to grind through what's already there. It's a very different day when you've recommitted to it. This is what I'm going to take ownership today. And there's certain blindness in our culture that we found over the years of people not understanding the power of conversation. You see, where all of this happens is in your conversations. And because most of us have not been taught to be aware of our conversation, we just have them, except we don't have them. They have us. See, conversations are either generative, giving you choices, or they're not. They're descriptive, in which there are no choices. So where do you have generative conversations? Like asking, what are my choices? What am I committed to? What do I really care about? How often do you have those conversations? We have our students engage with these conversations, but we do it for the sake of, this should be a conversation you have for the rest of your life. It's not something to learn. It's something it needs to be part of your breathing pattern. Oh, what do I care about today? Am I taking care about what I care about today? So do you have rhythms? And are your rhythms renewing you? In terms of vitality, one of the principles we ran into over the decades of our work has been called the focal practice. The thing that I do that just lights me up, and if I do this, I just feel great and I'm ready to go again. For some people, it's jogging. Heaven forbid, not for me. For some people, it's cooking or eating or reading or doing something. But what's your focal practice that brings you back to center, brings you back, that allows you to renew yourself, that allows that part of you who says, I want to be alive, and you're working too hard. And that part says, oh, thank you. We're good to go again. Do you have a focal practice or two? Do you make time for them? You see, when we're in the grind, do, sometimes we say, well, I don't have time for that. I don't have time for reflection. I don't have time for rest. I don't have time to innovate. I don't have time to grow. That's when we've turned ourselves into a production machine. An ATM for somebody that's not you. It's time to stop and step back and say, do I have these rhythms? I call these sacred rhythms. You're not going to be healthy unless you breathe deeply and exhale deeply. You're not going to be healthy if you don't work hard and rest. Champion athletes know that their rest plan, their rest periods are just as important as their exertion periods. I didn't know that. That's why I burned out. How we doing? Making sense? These are things that for most people are blind spots. They're points of design. And when we see them as choices, we can make better choices. And so we have this principle for renewal conversations. What's your rhythm of conversation? How often do you talk about living a good life? With whom? How often do you talk about the strategy, not just of your projects or of your business, but of your good life? How often do you talk about your level of vitality or challenges in the domain of your energy, not only physical, but emotional? Another part of our cultural blind spot is we've been taught to be solo artists. So take a deep breath. Now that we've seen some of the principles here, I'm going to say a few things about morale, and then we're going to have you do a breakout and see where you're at with this reflection. The way you see the world and the way you act in it is not fixed. You can learn. The world you see is not the way it is. It's the way you see it. And if you can learn to step to another perspective, you can see different possibilities. That's what we call being generative. To know there are choices, even if you don't know what they are. And I'm going to explore them. To not be stuck. And morale, as long as we're not in burnout, but we have some positive vitality. I checked out what morale was defined as, and the dictionary says, it's one of the few definitions I get from dictionaries that I thought was semi-decent. It said, morale is an assessment of confidence, enthusiasm, and discipline. I would add trust and determination. It's not just one thing. But what does this confidence, enthusiasm, and discipline refer to? It's your posture toward the future. And so morale is basically, do I feel like I can generate something positive out of this future or not? Yes or no? What's the music of my life? What's the mood of my life? As my wife Josefina would say, what's your soundtrack? Nah, 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 another day, nah, nah. Or, whoa, we got possibilities. What's your soundtrack? And remember, we're talking about the learning edge. Everything I'm proposing to you are places of exploration and possibility. If you're not satisfied, if you see it could be better, you can declare it a place of learning. And so for morale, which sometimes we associate with culture, I'll go back to this question, are you winning in your games? And the first place to look with winning in your games in life is, have you dedicated yourself to unwinnable games? Let me share with you some of the common unwinnable games that we find people have as we coach them in their leadership journeys. Well, I have to be perfect. That's amazingly a common story. It's impossible. It's an unwinnable game. How about being a human being living a good life, making contribution that you value? That's different than being perfect. I have to take care of everybody else. I come last if I come at all. That's a story that will eat your life and leave you either exhausted or resentful. And so we each have certain contextual stories in which we approach life that are so much a part of how we have been oriented in our lives and learned in our life that we don't even examine them. We don't even see them. We just live them out. And this is the valuable part of the reflection exercise, is to zoom out, zoom back, and look, what story am I living in? Where the hell did that come from? And am I committed to it? Because if you're not, you can change it. And I'm not talking about slapping a smiley face sticker on it. I'm talking about changing the depths of your embodied, emotional, committed, and spiritual being. These are learning edges. And that's simply waking up to being generative. And so are you winning? And write down 2 places that you're winning in your life, and write down 2 places where you'd say, I don't think I'm winning. If I could change things, I'd like to change things there. I don't feel like a winner in that one. Might just be hanging out with your body. What emotions you find yourself in, how our relationship is going. Where am I winning? Where am I not winning? Where can I be more generative? And the power of conversation here, a couple of guidelines that we've learned over our decades. One is, find people you trust and have these conversations with others, because most people are very unproductive trying to handle these questions alone. Trying to do them alone is part of the problem. No wonder you're lonely. Doing everything alone. One of the big business conversations is employee engagement. And the Gallup people have surveyed over 27 million people, and they say 70% of employees in the US are disengaged from their work, and it's even higher in other countries. It's like, no. And when you look at the survey they did, they asked 12 questions. 10 of them are conversations. 70% of employees in the US are disengaged because 10 simple conversations are missing. And if we're going to take a leadership stance, and so what are the missing conversations for you? That's my gift to you in this conversation. Every outcome in morale or burnout or managing vitality is a result of the conversations you live in. What's the missing conversation or possible conversation that you could open? And we're going to do a breakout now so you can explore that with someone in the group. Say, what are the missing conversations for me? What's an edge I'd like to work at? And then come back and we'll chat a little bit about it. Because this is one of the biggest things we've learned in my decades of working with this stuff is people have accepted their edge as permanent rather than a place of creation. Make sense? Give me high tens. I'm giving you some pretty hot ass questions to explore. So let's do a breakout. Let's go for like 7 minutes. I know it's going to be short. Everybody's going to say not enough time. And I'm going to ask you, out of the conversation you're going to have, is think about who you're going to continue the conversation with in your life, because this is about your life, not about having good answers. And then we'll check in. Learning communities are one way to find networks or build them. I have people who graduated from our programs literally 20 years ago that are still meeting as learning teams because they learned how to have important conversations together. And they're not traveling solo. So that's for all of us. It's the conversations that matter, and doing them alone gets very boring because you just listen to yourself. So good luck with that one. And anybody's interested in building some networks around a topic, stick it in the chat. Maybe we can get some conversations going here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Charlie, you have your hand up next, please.
Hey, nice to meet you again here. So my question is really related to how I can help like my wife to change her story. You know, she is actually the example Bob gave. Say, okay, she wants to take care of everyone around her, you know, her mom, my kid, and then take care of herself. But you know, she don't have lots of time to take care of herself.
Yeah.
So from time to time, she do burn out and say, oh, I'm hurting here, there, you know, I have bad moods from time to time. You know, I think I do my part to say, you know, how I can help there, maybe send her to your workshop.
Well, Charlie, I from being in my third marriage, I do have some advice to you. Your opening salvo of saying, how do I get my wife to change her story, is not a good starting point.
Okay.
But I see that you're trying to help take care of her.
Yeah.
And this is part of learning to have conversations together, and they're more tender in personal relationships, of course. But I think the most important thing I've learned, and I'm happily married, finally, by the way, is that the starting point is just to frickin' appreciate and love the way they are. Not be the critic, and just appreciate them, and then say, what else is possible? I have an assessment, but I'm not committed to it that you should change. I'm saying you could. Is there some way I could help? And learn to have this conversation of exploration together. And damn, this would be quite a market if we could help couples have conversations out there in the world for this. But I found in my prior two marriages, that's what was missing. We didn't know how to set up the conversations. And so I think it's a really good edge to start exploring. And, you know, you're going to spend the rest of your lives together, I trust and hope. And you both, the question is, you know, can we make it better, or can we take care of each other?
Yeah.
And see what happens there. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
All right. And Ruth, please.
Hi, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, Yeah, so I was thinking about missing conversations, and two contexts came up, both in my work with my team, trying to build morale. There's all kinds of conversations that should be opened up, and the challenge is knowing how to open them up with different people that I don't know. But similarly, in my personal life with relationships, I'm getting stuck at opening up needed conversations out of my fear of what the response or reaction or the other person is going to be. So out of my own concerns, I'm not opening up conversations that really need to be had out of me being stuck in, worrying about what the response is going to be.
Yeah, very good. So I can offer a couple of things that we've learned in these journeys for those conversations. One, in the personal domain, is that when a conversation you think is going to be challenging, don't just start the conversation, talk about the conversation. Have a conversation about the conversation. I'd like to have a conversation about something so that we could take a look at something or figure something out together or have each other's concerns. And I'm not looking to, step on your toes or be a critic, but I think this is something we want to do as a couple or as a relationship, is how are each of us doing? How do we come to take a look at situations that are just normal, that come up when people are different, about how we want to share certain things? Are you open to that conversation? Mm-hmm. And so the mood of that is invitation. And once they're open to talk about the conversation, you can say, well, what would make it work for you? Because I don't want to have this become a triggering conversation. I'm just wanting to look at different perspectives. One of the early practices in my career in this tradition, Ruth, was learning how to share assessments that were different than other people's assessments, or share assessments about people. And the simple structure of it was, I have an assessment. I'm not claiming it's true or right or the only assessment. It's just a perspective, but I'd like to explore it for the sake of what might be opened up for the both of us. Another practice was when people would make assessments, we'd say, oh, I see you have an assessment. I think I can see why you say that. And I have a different perspective. Can we practice looking at both perspectives and see what's possible? And over time, when that became available with people, they began to see that a conversation could share multiple perspectives rather than be a fight for who's going to win with the right one. And that's part of the practice. And so with the personal conversation, I think talking about the conversation before trying to have it can open up that door. With your team, what's your role? Are you the team leader or?
Yes, I am the team leader. Like the department. Yeah.
All right.
Big team.
So there's a whole set of team leading conversations that deal with exactly what you're talking about. How do we produce safety and trust to have conversations for people to share opinions that are different? And maybe there's disagreement. Disagreement's not a problem. People make a big mistake. They turn disagreement into conflict. A disagreement is not conflict. It's disagreement. And it's actually can be very productive if we're willing to examine multiple points of view. So here we go again with multiple points of view. And so there's a rhythm that I learned to have with the people on my team. I would meet with them one-on-one. I did it weekly. And we did that. We said, what's our role? What are you promising to me? What do I promise to you? How are we going to coordinate? So we kind of set up the rules of the game before we talked about any situations. And that was very helpful. And I got clear, I want to hear your honest opinions, and I'm here to help you succeed. But since I'm the team leader, I also happen to be your customer. And that has to be understood, that I am the one that has to, the reason you're paid is I'm satisfied with your work. And you also need to be satisfied with how I'm supporting you. It's a two-way street. But if that's not clear, everybody's in this, well, you got an opinion? Well, I got one too. And being a leader means you have the responsibility for the final call on anything that affects the team. But you want to do it after having had open, respectful, safe conversations. So that's a whole learning edge that is part of what we teach in our programs. But find people you can learn about. Developing those skills would be my recommendation.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome. So Chris is going to make a couple of announcements here, and then I'm going to hang on for anybody who wants to chat further about some of these missing conversations or domains of building morale or managing aliveness at the edge of burnout. Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. And just by raise of hands, was there a nugget, a question that you took away that is like, yeah, that sits with me, and that's going to be helpful? Just kind of get a pulse from everybody. Some hands up, maybe not. Okay.
Oh, thank God.
That's okay. Well, that's okay. Be honest. We want to be listening to you for sure, and then we'll continue, because we are going to continue to offer these sessions with Bob, our CEO, Andrea Bordenka, Samir Dua, the CEO of IGL Asia. And so the conversations are going to be largely centered around what you all find relevant and valuable. So if you do find that this conversation's been valuable and you want to continue to explore, and as Bob highlighted, to begin to practice and develop the skills that are generative, that allow you to be not just the observer, but the actor, and to move from not just knowing about, but knowing how to. We invite you into a conversation to explore the Generative Leadership Program. And we will be having a conversation next Wednesday from 4:30 to 5:30 Mountain, 6:30 to 7:30 Eastern. We'll be sending out an invitation for you. And it's just a place to explore for each of you, and to see what can you take care of in your life and work, your career, with your teams, including in conversational spaces like this around morale and employee burnout. And we know that there's many other conversations like strategy and innovation and creating a good life. And so how do we really excel in that? And that's the gift. And that, as many of you know, as some of you are actual students right now or graduates, you've had that experience, you know what that's about. So I invite you also to join, and you can share some of your experiences next Wednesday. So thank you all very much for joining us. I love that you are active participants in the world and creating a better world for where everyone can thrive. And with that, let's open it up for a little bit more conversation. For those of you that are still on, look forward to having you join. Also, by the way, I'm going to throw in the email address, the general email address. So if you want to reach out to me personally, I get that email there, but so do some of my colleagues, and love to connect with you and learn a little bit more about what's cooking in your world. So with that, let's take some more shares.
Yeah, questions, comments, explorations as a leader, coach, human being, figuring out how to have more choice in your life. Who'd like to explore a little bit? What you got?
Boy, Bob, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So hi, by the way. So what got triggered for me in this conversation when we were talking about edges and missing conversations was around, I started to have some confusion about a commitment that I have to mostly being comfortable. And that, not that I don't do anything uncomfortable, because I surely do, but I think I have a preference that being comfortable is a better place to be than putting myself in situations where I might not be comfortable.
Yeah, no, it's a big one. One of my first challenges when I was learning in this tradition was facing, I don't want to have this missing conversation. That feels as uncomfortable as hell. Why would I want to do that? And so I sat with that and began to look at it and saw how many places that I would avoid because it would be uncomfortable, or I was afraid it would be. And as you said, you still do things that are uncomfortable. Why do we do that? What I found was that what was important for me as a leader was to act from my commitment for the excellence of my team and its results and taking care of the people on it, than keeping myself comfortable to avoid challenging conversations. And so one of the things that did for me was, how do I learn to be comfortable when I'm uncomfortable? How do I learn to move from my commitment rather than my comfort? And it didn't mean that comfort didn't matter, except when I compared it to, if being uncomfortable is going to block me from fulfilling my commitment, I'm going to choose commitment. And the way you told your story, Bruce, it kind of sounded like, why would I want to be uncomfortable? It sounded like what discomfort means for you, or the listening I have for it, is that you're going to put yourself into no-win situations, or situations where there's going to be risk or damage. And why would you want to do that? And I agree with that. I wouldn't do that either. But if you're going to take on a challenging situation, say, I'm going to go in and see if I can produce something good here. And it may not work out. And I may have to face some crap along the way. I'll give it a shot. And so it's not a black and white thing. And I think it has a lot to do with, what do you mean by comfort? Because when you described what you wanted to avoid, that didn't sound like comfort. That sounded like risk.
Yeah.
And so I think you have a spectrum there, and we all should have. I think safety is number one. I don't think we should sacrifice safety or integrity or being respectful or being respected. But at the same time, we may have to face disagreement, resistance, upset that my body doesn't like. It's not a preference, but I'm definitely willing to do that if there's something bigger at stake in terms of the outcome. And so I just suggest you refine a little bit better what that commitment to comfort is really all about. I'm not sure it's all comfort.
Okay.
Sounds pretty healthy to me, actually.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Delia, you had your hand up at one point. Would you like to still share? And Tom, I see you, my friend, as well.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Bob, I attended the foundations with Chris as well in Mill Valley in oh gosh, I think it's over 7 years ago.
Oh my God.
And I've been in leadership development since, and I just can't tell you how often I rely on the learning and the practice, and how applicable and just really, truly transformational that experience was. And it's always shocking how much it is just infused in everything that I have done since then. So I just want to express the utmost respect and gratitude, and as a testament to your teaching, your presence, just the brilliance of the work. And it really, from my humble scope, it's just been really magical. So thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Do you pronounce your first name Delia?
Delia.
Delia. Thank you for that. I want to give credit where credit is due. We come from a tradition called ontological design, and my master teacher was Dr. Fernando Flores, the guy who developed that field. And he said, good ontology is when you show someone good ontology, it's obvious to them, but it wasn't obvious to them before you showed them. It reveals the world in a way you say, damn, it's been in front of me all along. Now I can see it. And so that's where the power comes from. My role in it, and bringing it to the world and delivering it, is just trying to not get in the way of that experience, and to help people have the experience and explore it, and then face all the edges that we're talking about, all the edges that get provoked, because it means, oh my God, if my commitment matters, I need to reorganize my life. I don't know if I want to do that. So,
Well, I'll
so
just say you do a masterful job of that. And I, always feel very safe. And it's just such a
good.
wonderful scaffolding that you provide, to it. So thank you.
Beautiful. I would say that part of, and this is for all of us, we're trying to reach the foundational experiences of being human that we all share, that open up our choices. What could be better than that? And so it's worth the journey to do that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Tom, and then Sandra, I see your hand up as well. So Tom, please.
Hi, Bob.
Hi.
Hi, Chris. First of all, I really enjoyed that extraordinarily short breakout session that I had with John, and I see he's still with us. So thank you, John. I come to these things for your presence.
Mm.
And that leads to things that are usually completely unexpected for me.
Mm.
And in my coaching and my consulting, one of the hallmarks that I've taken from you is that almost every issue or challenge or problem comes from a missing conversation or missing conversations.
Yeah.
And people really get that.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Well, today, the missing conversation that I got in touch with, the conversations were the ones my parents would not have with me
Yes.
after my sister died.
Ah.
And it was a refusal after requests. So thank you for letting me deal with it again. But when I lived, part of my conversation with John was that I lived in Santa Barbara, where he has done some work. And they had a program in Santa Barbara that I called a special Big Brothers and Big Sisters program, where you could work with children and teens that had lost a parent or a child to death or suicide, but you had to have had that conversation or had that experience in your life. So I qualified because my sister had died when I was 7. And at the last gathering where they brought people in to see who was in the program and the parents of the children, et cetera, they had everybody go around to the parents that were left, that were giving their children to, not giving them to us, but putting them, in the program with us.
Yes.
And one couple, the mother started to say, we have a child left. And I'm so hurt. I don't know what to say to them. And the father said the same thing. And I was just someone there that was just, a participant in the program, going to work with a child. And I could not speak.
Yeah.
And I said, talk to them.
Beautiful.
And the father said, we don't know what to say. I said, tell them that. And so part of my awareness in terms of value for continued work with people is that's a place inside of me that was genuine in that moment. But particularly in business, consulting, when people won't have the conversation, I really get into a fuck you attitude. You're not even willing to talk about it. And so today's great value for me is there is very likely some hurt behind that.
Yes, of course.
With those other people. So
Tom,
I thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing that. Your heartfelt exploration of that wound shows a huge missing conversation in our culture. So many families. My wife 3 years ago undertook a study of death and dying
Mm-hmm.
because she had a sister pass away, and she said, "This is big. I don't know what to do with this." And our culture tends to deal with death by ignoring it. And you're absolutely right. It's a missing conversation. We need to learn that we can't be fully alive if we can't include death. And we need to learn to deal with grief, not only in the passing of people, but grief is a part of our human experience where something we loved no longer exists. And that doesn't have to be a wound. That doesn't have to be a permanent wound. And I really appreciate your sharing that personal experience of it, but also bringing it to that bigger context. The missing conversations matter, and declining to have them matters. And you see the consequence. And this is the responsibility we take on with leadership. So when Bruce talked about being comfortable, these are some of the uncomfortable conversations that we need to take responsibility for. How do we do that? Declaring and learning it. You don't even need to know what to do. I don't know what to do here. Well, let's talk. Let's see what the hell's possible. And from a place of respect and care and safety. And so this is you've shared just one of so many of the glaring blind spots of our culture. And these are the blind spots when they're revealed that people run away from. And part of leadership is, that fire, I need to walk into that one. I need to learn how to walk into that fire and not be burned, and help other people do that as well, because otherwise it will burn us. And that's why I have such appreciation and honor for those of you here taking on that challenge. Thank you. Ms. Sandra.
Trying to unmute, sorry. My question is, I'm late. I was wanting to be in the presence of this topic and this group, so I came late. But one thing you said struck me, and I wonder if you can open it up a little bit more. If the leader of the team, or the manager in my case, is the customer and it has to be satisfied, and that one of the requests to be satisfied is a congruence of opinion, and it's creating a culture of better don't say anything. So there has been a recent change, and there's a new thing for the team. I feel like I don't see possibilities. Like, I've tried to have conversations, they end up being very heated emotionally, and I'm sure I have a part on that. But how do I not get into, there's nothing to do, this person is defensive, or I am reactive, or whatever?
Well, yes, you're right in the middle of that fire. So are you the team leader?
I am a team leader, but I'm talking about my second level. Yeah. My manager. Yeah, the second level of the team.
Yeah. That's even more sophisticated. But you said we have to have an alignment of opinion. No, we don't. We have to have an alignment of promises, not opinions.
Mm.
And if you have an opinion that you do it differently, but you can make the promise. See, as a manager, I'm not interested in you agreeing with all my opinions.
Mm.
That's not useful. I'm interested in that you make trustworthy promises that your role is responsible for, and I can count on you, and that you participate on the team as willing to coordinate, manage breakdowns, and help the team be a good team. Then we can have difference of opinion, fine. And this is the thinking that you just demonstrated is because we want one thing, that means this other thing is true. No, that's collapsing domains. We don't need to be all sharing the same. Now, let me unpack this a little bit. What is the role of the leader? And what is the role of the team member? The role of the leaders who have the conversation around what is going to be shared on the team. Your responsibility as a leader is the conversations. The responsibility of the conversations is we produce agreements. We produce agreements around our promises, and we negotiate. We don't dictate, we negotiate. We do produce agreement around certain standards for certain assessments that have to be made in the work of the team. We produce an agreement around practices. And when there is not alignment on the team as a team leader, you declare it. If you're on the team, you need to do it this way because we can't. Consensus doesn't work. You see when. Are you familiar with American football? Yeah.
Not much.
Well, let's talk about soccer. Okay, you play soccer, right? And
Yeah.
Before the game, the team is practicing, and they have plays, right? And sometimes the coach will call a play.
Mm.
Well, we don't stop the game and everybody have an argument about, do you like the call? In that situation, when the play is called, you do the play. Now, maybe after the game, you have a conversation saying, I think it was the wrong play. I think we should change the play. That's having a team conversation. And so there are learning where we take the stand and where we take, where we have to participate in the standards of the team as it stands. That doesn't mean that you can't have opinions about it and say, I think they could be better. Are you willing to listen? The last thing I'll say, Sandra, about this conversation is that people don't know how to deal with disagreement.
Mm.
They think disagreement is a fight, a conflict, a disrespect, all of that, which is totally crazy. The asset of the team is you have different points of view. This is a good thing. Different points of view open the spaces of possibility of how to make the judgment. And so a good leader allows everybody to have their point of view. Doesn't mean they get their way all the time. Doesn't mean that everybody agrees with them. It means you offer your point of view. And when I was a team leader, I said, everybody gets, unless we have an emergency, everybody gets to weigh in. Everybody gets to offer their perspective. And then we discuss and see if we can align. And if we're not aligned, I will make the call because we're in the game and we need to run the play. And if just one more thing, if you're not willing to do that, you're telling me you're not on the team. And I will listen to your request because a team cannot function with everybody wanting to do it their own way. And so when you negotiate with a boss, you have to figure out, where do I get heard? Where can I show up as offering new value? And when, what is my assessment of the boss? And if you're in a toxic environment, maybe you cannot be heard. I don't know. Then you have a different conversation about what am I going to do for my dignity? That's a different conversation than I have a bad boss. Does that resonate?
Or for the team, sake, what am I going to do if the environment is toxic? Yeah, I get it from a leadership point of view.
Yeah.
how to deal with a leader that has a different perspective and not getting stuck and there are no options. That was my main thing. Yeah. Thank
Very
you.
good. Yeah. Build a winning game to deal
Mm.
with this guy, gal that is your boss. Okay. So thank you. I think we'll wrap it up here, but I appreciate your
Bob?
coming to the conversation. Was there one more?
Yeah, I'm sorry. John,
Yeah,
John had
I've
his
got
hand up if it's okay.
two brief points.
Yeah.
Two brief points, one tactical, one more strategic. Tactically, you may remember Danny Pearl, the journalist who was beheaded. His dad taught at UCLA, and he told me once the word conversation, to your point about disagreement. He says, don't think of con as pro and con against, but con as in with, from the Latin roots, right? And versa, coming around. He said, a conversation is coming around to each other's point of view. And I find that when I talk with people, sometimes when it starts to get defensive, bringing that model up kind of helps reset things. It takes you out of the moment, and it also gives you a different framework. The other quick comment is, this could have been a half-a-day workshop. I mean, every other sentence for me spurred thoughts that we could just, we could take off on, we could check in with each other, we could explore. So many ramifications at the personal level with the client, with the relationship. That whole point of missed conversations is something that, like I say, a half a day easily that we could just work through would be awesome. So
I agree. You gotta, when you go to the grocery store and they give you a little sample to taste something,
there we go.
that's not what we can do in these short sessions. But the hope here is that you're walking out with, I see a conversation. I want to continue.
Yeah.
And
a zillion of them.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks for the time, Chris.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Valeria. Shashu, good to see you again. Ruth, good to see you again as well. Tom, my friend. Sandra, thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Bye.
Bye.
I'd like you to join next Wednesday. And we can begin bigger conversations, longer ones. Where we get to dive in deeper.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.